Welcome back to the deep dive. We're diving into modern warfare this time.
Yeah, it's really changing fast right now.
It really is. And we've got some sources that suggest there are some pretty surprising shifts in military strategy.
Oh, yeah. Lots to talk about there for sure.
Definitely. I think it'd be good to start with, what's making headlines right now that fighting in Velika, Ukraine?
Right. Yeah, with those two Ukrainian brigades.
Yeah, nearly encircled.
And that's really where it gets interesting, because encirclement isn't what it used to be.
Yeah, I was thinking about that reading up on this. Like the siege of Mariupol's Azovstal plant, that was a real classic encirclement, right? Cutting them off completely.
Yeah, you got no supplies, no reinforcements. That was it.
But Velika, it seems different somehow.
Yeah, it is different. You see a true blockade, that's almost impossible now.
Is that because of drones?
Exactly. Drones can get supplies in, medicine ammo.
Yeah.
They can keep a surrounded unit going way longer.
But it's not like the classic CJ, starve them out.
It's more about disruption. Yeah. Keeping them off balance.
So like constant pressure, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Make it hard to move, hard to counterattack.
And that's where that term comes in, right? Operational encirclement.
Yeah, exactly. It's not about closing the lines completely, but about control, disrupting them, and keeping them under threat.
So less about a physical barrier,
Yeah.
more about this zone of control.
That's a good way to put it. And drones are key to making that happen.
It's interesting, there's that old saying, he who controls the air controls the battlefield.
Well, now it's he who controls the drones controls the battlefield, I guess.
You got it. And that brings us to this other example that stuck out to me, the Kurakov pocket.
Yeah, that one really shows you how disruptive drones can be.
Totally. Like areas that used to be safe for supply convoys.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Drones can just strike out of nowhere, basically.
Makes it a nightmare just getting supplies through.
It's almost like going back to World War I, when artillery, you could just hit anywhere.
That's a great analogy. The psychological impact is huge. Imagine being a soldier knowing just getting supplies is risky.
It's got to be nerve-wracking. I can't even imagine.
Changes everything.
And then there's this whole other angle. I honestly did not expect China.
Oh, yeah. They're huge in the drone game now.
Right. Both Russia and Ukraine are using Chinese components.
Heavily reliant on them.
So China really has this unique leverage.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They're supplying both sides. It's fascinating.
Kind of like the chip situation with the U.S., right? We depend on them for chips.
Exactly. Shows you how vulnerable you can be when you rely on someone else for key tech.
Especially a potential rival.
Geopolitics, right. It's like this big chess game.
And China's playing it well.
For sure. So we've got these drones changing how battles are fought. China's supplying everyone. And then on top of that, we've got this, this new figure making waves.
Yeah, this person's been all over the news lately.
Mm-hmm.
And not always for the best reasons.
Right. They've got this unique communication style, let's say.
Unique is one word for it. But their pronouncements are pretty bold.
That's for sure. Especially about this Iron Dome missile defense system.
Like the Israeli system, right?
Exactly. They're saying it's the answer to everything.
But can it really work for a whole country like the U.S.?
That's the big question, right? Israel's system is for a small area, pretty simple threats.
Rockets, mortars, that sort of thing.
Exactly. Not ICBMs.
Intercontinental ballistic missiles. Those are a whole different ballgame.
You can say that again. And plus, any defense system is only as good as the latest offense tech.
It's a never-ending race.
An arms race, exactly. Always trying to stay one step ahead.
And speaking of arms races, we were just talking about how drones are becoming less effective.
With the countermeasures, yeah.
But couldn't drone tech just evolve?
Yeah.
Overcome those challenges?
Well, it absolutely could. I mean, think about how far it's come in just a few years. Drones are getting better all the time.
So what are we talking about? Drones immune to jamming, to EMPs.
It's all on the table. Faster, more agile, stealthier, more resilient.
And it's not just about the tech itself.
No, it's the tactics too, how you
Yeah.
use those drones.
So picture this, a future battlefield full of drones.
What would that even look like?
Would it be like a plane war, surgical strikes, or would it be totally chaotic?
That's the big question. Nobody really knows.
Kind of unsettling to think about, honestly.
Definitely raises some big questions about the future of warfare.
Okay, well, I think that's a good place to pause for now. We've covered a lot of ground here, from the situation in Ukraine to these bigger trends in warfare.
And we're just getting started.
Exactly.
Huh.
So join us for part 2 of this deep dive where we'll delve even deeper into these topics and more.
Yeah, it's really a really fluid situation,
Yeah.
2 brigades in a tough spot, but it's not like they're doomed.
Right. That's what's so interesting about this whole operational encirclement thing. It's not about cutting them off entirely.
It's about disruption. Yeah. Making it hard for them to actually function.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In the past,
Yeah.
encirclement meant you were done for. No supplies, no way out.
Game over, basically. But drones change the whole equation now.
So are you saying drones are...
I think they're definitely forcing a rethink. You know, drones can bring in everything. Food, water, medicine. Even ammo.
It's crazy to think about. It's like a lifeline from the sky.
And not just that, they can scout out enemy positions too. You know, act as eyes in the sky. And even launch their own attacks.
So they can harass the encircling force, basically.
Exactly. Keeps them on edge. Disrupts their operations.
It's not just about the drones themselves, though, is it? It's about how they change the whole nature of warfare.
Right. It's a different kind of fight. It's harder to get those decisive victories now.
So we've got these incredibly powerful drones changing how battles are fought. And then we've got China supplying both sides with the tech behind those drones.
It's a wild situation.
Yeah.
Where does all this lead? What does the future of warfare look like?
It's a big question for sure. I mean, are we entering a whole new era of warfare?
I think we are in an era where technology is more important than ever.
And where are those lines between, the traditional powers and these tech giants?
They're getting blurred.
Yeah.
Definitely.
It's a lot to wrap your head around. To be honest, I don't think we fully understand what all this means yet.
We're just starting to see the implications play out.
But one thing's for sure, the future of warfare. It's going to be anything but predictable.
For sure. And amidst all the tech and everything, it's important to remember the human element.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, wars are still fought by people.
Exactly. And those people are facing incredible challenges right now, especially in places like Velika Novosilka.
It's got to be tough. Constant drone surveillance, disrupted supply lines.
And that psychological pressure of being trapped.
And we were talking about how effective those countermeasures are getting.
If those supply lines get cut entirely.
That could be a turning point.
Absolutely. And let's not forget about China's role in all of this.
Right. They're the wild card in all of this. Supplying both sides.
Adds a whole other layer of complexity to an already complex situation.
It's like this high-stakes chess game. Multiple players with different objectives.
And nobody knows who's going to come out on top.
Okay, so we've got this incredibly dynamic situation in Ukraine. Drones are key. China's a major player. But let's shift gears for a second and talk about that controversial figure.
The one calling for an Iron Dome.
Yeah, right. They've been making some pretty bold claims about it. But can it really work for a country the size of the U.S.?
I mean, the Israeli system, it's designed for a much smaller area, simpler threats.
Not ICBMs.
Exactly. And any defensive system, it's only as good as the latest offensive tech.
You're always playing catch-up, basically.
Exactly. It's an arms race.
Speaking of arms races, we were just talking about how drones are becoming less effective.
Yeah.
But what if drone tech just evolves, to overcome those countermeasures?
Well, it's totally possible. The tech is constantly evolving.
So we could see drones that can't be jammed. Drones that are immune to EMPs.
It's all on the table. Faster, more agile, stealthier, more resilient.
And it's not just about the tech itself either, right?
No, it's about how you use it, the strategy.
So let's imagine for a second a future battlefield completely dominated by drones.
It's kind of a scary thought, isn't it?
It is. Would it be a clean war? Precise surgical strikes? Or would it be total chaos?
That's a tough one. I think it'd probably be a mix of both.
On one hand, you have the potential for precision, less collateral damage.
Right. Drones can target very specific things, minimize the risk to civilians.
But on the other hand,
you could have these swarms of autonomous drones, unpredictable interactions.
It could be a nightmare scenario, honestly.
Definitely. And it raises some big questions about the role of human soldiers.
Will we even need soldiers in the future? Will wars be fought entirely by machines?
It's a disturbing thought.
It is. But let's not get too carried away. Let's focus on what we know for sure. We know drones are already having a huge impact.
That China's role is changing everything.
These are the things we need to be thinking about right now.
Absolutely, because this is all happening right now. It's not some distant future.
And the conflict in Ukraine, it's a stark reminder of that.
That's real. It's happening now.
So where do we go from here? What are the key takeaways from all of this?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that the world of warfare is in flux. It's changing fast.
And technology is driving that change.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we need to understand these changes and what they mean.
For everyone.
Yeah.
For global security.
Exactly. And we can't forget about the ethical side of all this.
We touched on this earlier, but it's something we need to keep talking about.
As we develop new weapons, we have to think about how they'll be used.
Of the consequences.
Exactly.
So it's a heavy topic, but we can't ignore it.
We have to engage with it.
So what can people do? How can they make their voices heard on these issues?
I think the first step is to stay informed, stay curious.
Read about these issues, follow the news.
Ask questions. Don't be afraid to challenge the status quo.
That's great advice. And of course, keep listening to the deep dives.
We'll keep digging into these complex topics, bringing you the latest insights and analysis.
So much to unpack in this deep dive, from Ukraine to the big picture of where warfare is headed.
It's really it's a lot to process. Yeah.
It is. And one of the biggest things for me is this whole question of drone technology.
Right. How much it's changing things.
Exactly. We talked about how drones are becoming less effective, per drone.
Yeah, as militaries figure out countermeasures.
But what if they just evolve? Drone tech just gets so good it overcomes those challenges.
Oh, it's definitely possible. I mean, look how fast it's advanced.
I know, right? So what are we talking here? Drones that jamming doesn't even work on?
Could be, yeah. Immune to EMPs?
What about autonomous drones, like swarms of them?
It's all possible. Honestly, it's hard to even imagine what they'll be capable of in a few years.
And it's not just about the tech itself, right?
No, it's the tactics, how you use those drones.
So picture this, a future battlefield completely dominated by drones.
It's kind of a terrifying thought, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. Would it be like some super clean war, surgical strikes? Or would it be total chaos?
It's hard to say. You can make a case for both, I think.
I mean, on one hand, you've got the potential for precision, right? Less collateral damage.
Targeting specific things, minimizing the risk to civilians.
But on the other hand,
it could get really messy. Swarms of autonomous drones.
And who knows what those interactions would look like?
It could spiral out of control pretty easily.
And then there's the big question, what happens to soldiers?
Right. If wars are fought by drones, do we even need soldiers anymore?
It's a scary thought.
It really is.
Okay, so to wrap up this deep dive, what are the big takeaways here? What should people be thinking about as we move forward?
I think the biggest thing is that we're at a turning point. Warfare is changing fundamentally.
And technology is driving that change.
Exactly. We need to understand these changes, what they mean for the future.
And what about the ethical side of all this?
We can't forget about that. We have to think about the consequences of these new technologies.
So it's a lot to think about.
It is. But it's important. We can't ignore these issues.
Well said. Okay, so that wraps up our deep dive this week. Thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure.
Subscribe to our podcast, which is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube.